So this week is about the Easter Triduum. So tri, like triangle, tricycle, means three. Duum is another form of dies, which is the Latin word for day. So it's 3 days. So it's Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter. And you'll go, wait a minute, that's 4 days. But we start at the vigil on Thursday. And in the old way of looking at things, the next day started after sunset. So that's where we have an ancient tradition, and that's the reason why. So it kind of really goes through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because Holy Thursday, the vigil. That's the reason why, by the way, you can go to Mass on Saturday night, and that is the Sunday Mass. If you notice, all the readings are the Sunday Mass readings. It's because it's a vigil Mass. We're looking forward, and a vigil means it's the day, it means you're looking for something. You're looking ahead, but it means that it's for the next day. So that's the reason why. You're going to find a lot of interesting things about counting for us, like Lent being 40 days and why it's 40, because if you count them, it doesn't quite come out that way. Anyway, so today we're going to look at the Paschal Mystery, and that's really a nice technical term. It's central to everything. To everything about being Catholic. And most of us don't really necessarily know exactly what that means. So if you look at a simple definition, which I've put in the links, it's simply the passion, death, and resurrection of Christ. But for me, I often think of it as being the life, death, and resurrection of Christ, because coming from heaven, coming from being in that state of the eternal now and perfection, here, anything life here is suffering by comparison to that. Some of you may remember the story about the little girl and her baby brother, and someday maybe I think that's online here somewhere, but it's a good story. Anyway, the point is, here is nothing like there, and there will be nothing like here if we're blessed to be there someday. So, believing in Jesus, I wrote notes again because I have to. I'm sorry. I didn't want to get this one wrong, and I actually wrote a lot of notes this time. But it only goes partway down to here, and then it's done. So it's not going to be that long for you. So believing in Jesus, in his life, death, and resurrection is central. And everybody knows that that's what Christianity is supposed to be about. And yet, it's very, very easy to lose sight of that. It can become just being in a club. It can become simply about social justice and making a better world. There's no shortage of movements that have tried to do that, political and not political. But if that's all it is, and I have personal experience with people that no longer really believe in Jesus. I mean, they believe him as a principle. They believe him as this is a nice way to be, or he was a nice guy, or maybe he really even existed. We don't know. I mean, that's kind of the attitude. But they don't really believe in the resurrection anymore. They don't really believe in the real presence in the Eucharist. They really don't believe the faith anymore. They just want to be good. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. And you know how I digress. But it's not just a matter of believing that it's a fact. It's not just a matter of thinking, oh yeah, Jesus lived, died, and rose from the dead. Okay, I'm done. That's my religion. I'm all done. Now let me go do something rotten. It's not about that. And it's not about a bunch of rules and following the rules. But when we say that it's central, what we mean is that we keep the reality of this in our heart, and we keep the reason why God did it in our heart and in our mind and in our soul and in everything we have. When Mary, the mother of Jesus, experienced some of the things in her life with him, it says, and this is like in Luke 2:19, and Mary kept all these things, reflecting on them in her heart. Now the translation I like better is one that says that she pondered all these things, treasuring them in her heart. A treasure is something you keep. You don't give it away easily. I mean, unless you really love somebody. it's not something that should be sold, really. It's if you treasure something, you want to keep it. And she did. And we should. And so pondering, to think about it. Okay, ponder comes from a word, essentially it means heavy, that it matters, which is kind of funny for some of the stuff later. It matters to us, and we reflect on it, and we keep it, and we treasure it. That's the thing, is to have it be that kind of a life, and not just saying, oh yeah, Jesus rose from the dead, I'm done. Because that's not the point. I'm going to go back to that probably more than once. So, to understand this, you have to go back to the history of religions a little bit. And you'll see that most, if not all, of the other religions are about placating the gods. Now, if you consider atheism a religion, then, what are you trying to placate there? Well, arguably, you're just trying to placate yourself. You're just trying to feel good about yourself and kind of get through life, and then you die, and that's all there is. And I'll let somebody else talk about how their feelings on being an atheist. But you're going to find some interesting stuff about that when we talk a little bit about the Greeks later on. So they're trying to stay out of trouble. In most religions, people were trying to stay out of trouble with God. And if you look at your own life and look at how you see God in your life, and maybe parents and relatives and what you hear, I don't know, what you see around you, the way people talk. If you really listen to people, you'll find that a lot of people that say that they're Christian are really trying to just stay out of trouble with God. Or they're trying to earn their way to heaven. I mean, it's those two. And both of those are not being Catholic. Neither one of them are. So let's talk about that a little bit. Okay, I like to introduce you to things that you'll probably pick up in college, and if you don't, you should make it happen. You don't have to get everything from school. So there's a guy, Lawrence Kohlberg. It's really worth it to study him. But Lawrence Kohlberg studied moral development. He tried to understand how people not just come to moral decisions, but how they think morally, what their sense of right and wrong is, how they develop it. And how does it work? And it's a lot more interesting than you might think. For me, everything is interesting. But so he did it in these stages. And the first stage is stay out of trouble. So this is the way a child is. I just had this discussion with a couple of my grandchildren who are, I think they're 10 and 11 now. I'm really bad with this. But they're at great, interesting ages. Now, this is not all the grandchildren I have. But one of them talked about, we had talked about this before, but we had talked about wanting to stay out of trouble because she was just afraid she was going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, and somebody was going to be mad at her. So we kind of launched off talking about Kohlberg. And the other one, and I had talked about this before with them, the other one, actually, the younger one, actually remembered. It was really cool. She was like, oh yeah, that was that stage. So I don't know. Children are amazing. If you try to teach children when they're young, you'd be surprised what they can learn. Anyway, so stage one of Kohlberg's moral development is staying out of trouble. That means that a person's idea of right and wrong is simply what will get them out of trouble. So if somebody will get them in trouble, it's bad. We don't want to do that. And their decisions will be based on staying out of trouble. So if you look at these older religions and some current ideas now, a lot of it's just about staying out of trouble. Certainly you can see a little bit of this in the news and everything else where people are getting in trouble. And now everybody has to say the right thing, do the right thing, or else they're going to be in trouble. Even if doing the thing that keeps them out of trouble is wrong. And oh my goodness, you got to get this. Sometimes doing the right thing will get you in trouble. And sometimes doing the wrong thing will earn you the praise of everyone around you. Oh, I can't even tell you how important this is. This is so crucial. And in school, they may still, I don't know, be teaching about World War II and the Nazis and the Holocaust and everything. People in Germany went along with the horrible, horrible things that happened because they wanted to stay out of trouble. I would argue they were stuck at Kohlberg's stage 1 of moral development as full-on adults. Now, there are people like Franz Jagerstatter that you can look up, Rupert Meyer, priests and lay people that opposed Hitler and got in trouble and were executed. I'm not going to forget Dietrich Bonhoeffer either. But these are some of the people that in Germany or other places close by, Austria, I guess, refused to go along with Hitler. But they got in trouble. Everybody, just about everybody, was going along with Hitler. The filmmakers, the writers, everybody was supporting this guy. People in the church, not just the Catholic Church, but the Lutheran Church, they were going along with it in many cases, not all. If there was any resistance, it was generally among the Catholics, but there were Lutheran pastors like Dietrich Bonhoeffer. So the point is, I'm trying to, sorry, I'm taking this longer than I should, but this is so important. They were all trying to stay out of trouble. And in those other religions, it's all about staying out of trouble. So remember that, and remember that sometimes you're going to make some trouble, but don't make the same trouble everybody else is making. If everybody else is doing something, it's probably wrong because people just have a problem with being in groups. So you got to be kind of careful. You have to figure out what you should do based on what you should do, not based on what everybody else is doing or what will keep you out of trouble. I'm sorry, that was really long. Some would say that humanity moved up a little bit over time, and not necessarily in Germany, and not necessarily now, but in some of the ideas where they moved up to stage 2. And stage 2 is to seek a pleasant afterlife. Okay? You're going to do the right thing because you're going to get rewarded. Now, it's not very different from staying out of trouble when you really think about it. It's just moving from a negative to a positive. Okay? So then it's like, okay, I'm going to not eat this. If you're Jewish and you're not supposed to eat pork, then, or Muslims don't eat pork. If I don't eat pork, then I can go to heaven, or I can have some pleasant thing. And lately, just because I've been listening to some lectures and stuff on Egypt, just a little bit, I just always have to share some of the stuff from there. So about the pyramids, they made a big deal about what they did with people after they died, so that they thought that if they preserved the body, that the person would have a pleasant afterlife. And okay, so in the first place, as I think I shared with you before, it was a ripoff anyway, because it didn't preserve the body. And the embalmers, the people that made the mummies, actually were just making money off of it. And I guess this whole thing was really a money-making thing. It really wasn't necessarily about religion. And take a lesson from that today. But the other thing is that in Egyptian religion, they did talk about the idea that there was a judgment in the afterlife, that after you died, there was a judgment, and that your soul was weighed against a feather. In other words, your soul had to be light as a feather or lighter than a feather for you to have a good afterlife, to not go into their equivalent of hell. And I think that's interesting. The idea is that doing wrong things is heavy and weighs us down. If you've done anything really bad or inadvisable, anything foolish in your life, and I have a lot, it doesn't always have to be a big sin. It doesn't always have to be that you hurt somebody. Do you ever do something really embarrassing and then you remember it for like the rest of your life? I mean, you're young. Maybe other people could be watching this, but I'm old. And there are things I remember from being, I just now thought of one. And I was like 5 years old. Okay, this is true confessions. A relative, when I was maybe 5 years old, and she wasn't actually, everybody was my aunt. But anyway, my Aunt Yvonne, I think it was, gave me a little camera, and it was a nice one, a film camera back in those days. I was probably 5 years old. Gave me a film camera. And somebody else had given me the exact same camera. And I said, oh, I have another one just like this. And, afterward, my mother said, that's not what you really say. If you get another one, you say thank you. And you don't make you don't do that. And it you know what? I'm still embarrassed by it now. And it's like I'm 5 years old. Can I feel guilty? No, I don't feel guilty. I just feel embarrassed. It was just silly. And could I have known better? No, not really. You know, I had to learn sometime. But, you know, there's things that can stick with you. And so those things, you could think of them as having a kind of weight. You know, that weighs on me a little bit. And it's not something I would take to confession, certainly. And I was baptized after that time, so it's forgiven anyway. But it's not about that. It's that I'm just embarrassed. And I still am, obviously, or else I wouldn't be telling you this story. I would have forgotten it. But I remember it almost 60 years later. And how did it not just get lost in all the other awful things in my life? I don't know, but it's still there. And I thought of it. So I'm sorry, this is going to take some time. I'm just barely getting anywhere. So it's symbolic. The good deeds are the joyful things. They're not the heavy things. And a light soul is a free soul. So they had some idea of it kind of right. Everybody in every culture over all of time got something right. That's a good thing to remember. The problem is that we have a tendency to poison things with what's wrong. So we're going to get to that. So most cultures had something like this. Stage 3 in Kohlberg's, remember Kohlberg? Stage 3 of Kohlberg was wanting to be seen as a good person. Now here we get into some issues. In the first place, you just try to stay out of trouble. The second place, you're trying to get a reward. You want your piece of candy. You want heaven, whatever. Now, you want to see yourself as a good person. And that's a problem that we'll get to in a minute. So now, the example for this one that I'll use is the ancient Greeks. Now, why do I use ancient stuff? Partly because when I use stuff today, it's all tied up in politics and people being angry and a lot of other stuff. We look at stuff in the past, we can learn just as much, but it doesn't carry a lot of the same weight. There we go again. It doesn't carry a lot of the current things, and we can talk safely about it often without getting in as much trouble. Oh, there, I'm trying to stay out of trouble. But really, I'm just trying to deal with things. And also, I'm trying to encourage you to study history, because you really should. There's a lot of things that make a lot more sense when you study history. The ancient Greeks created a society, we're talking before 500 BC, so 2,500 plus years ago, maybe 800 BC up to 500, because some things changed then, but still this is true. They created a society based on the idea of feeling better than other societies. It was all about feeling superior to everybody else. And it was bizarre. It was completely male-dominated. The women were not even second-class citizens. They weren't even citizens. They were just there. It was a horrible, horrible time, believe me. I'm sure there were some regular people that were decent, but probably the best people in ancient Greece may have been the slaves. They may have been the best quality people, because the rest of them, you know, and yet they gave us great things in music and philosophy, a lot of other things. They just had this problem. Anyway, have you ever heard the word barbarian? You know what a barbarian, I mean, you can kind of get a picture, right? You know, they're wearing like animal skins, they're all bearded, and their hair's all shaggy, and they stink, you know, the whole bit. Barbarian was a word invented by the Greeks to describe anybody that wasn't Greek. And the word barbarian comes from the idea that when they heard other people talk that didn't speak Greek, they said it sounded like ba 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 ba. So it kind of like blah blah blah. They're blah 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 barbarians. So that's where it comes from, in case you ever wondered. They actually made up a word for everybody that wasn't good enough. So from there, the stages go 4, 5, and 6. Now we'll go through all of them here for you, but you can see them and you can go back and study this. And I recommend that you do. It's really good. But the ideas of caring about other people, even justice, all those things, those kind of fall into those other areas. And you could someday learn about Immanuel Kant. I very much recommend it. Very, very great person to study. Had some really great ideas. Categorical imperative is the one that you'll hear about. And, don't worry about it right now, but Go study it. You can get it in college. And I really think it's worth it for you to take a survey course in philosophy as soon as you can. And bear in mind that some philosophy teachers will be kind of pushing their own thing, their own philosophy, or they'll push the modern philosophy. But just get the information. Even if the professor is bad, you can still pick up an awful lot, especially if you study a little more along what they're telling you. But don't always believe anything anybody tells you. Go look it up, make sure you're reading the actual source. That takes time, but it's worth it. So none of this relates to the Paschal Mystery, right? But it does, and here's how it relates. So all this stuff, there's all this growth in philosophy, and when you look at Kant and you look at Kohlberg and everything else, you can see all this wonderful stuff. But something went wrong. And humanity caught a disease early on, and it poisoned our moral development. Now, really, I think it poisoned our whole life. But it poisoned this moral development. And somebody like Kohlberg comes out with all these great things, and they're all really interesting and good and true. But here's the problem. Anyway, we call it original sin. It's passed down through the generations. And to explain it, we have a story about Adam and Eve and a serpent and the fruit in the garden. And the fruit was from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And I've covered this before, and I'll cover it again in some way. But don't get wrapped up in this is a literal story. The point is, it's explaining what went wrong in the only way that they could. And really, we don't have a better explanation now. This may be the best explanation ever. It doesn't say how it happened, but it kind of does. It doesn't mean that there was a snake, but we're going to get to that. So we find it easier to understand stories. So God gave us one so we wouldn't forget where we went wrong. Because if you think about it in your life, if you make a mistake that has bad consequences and you're suffering the consequences, the recovery is when you go back and look at where you went wrong and then try to fix it in yourself. And where we went wrong, even if something horrible happens to us and it wasn't our fault, we're still responsible to solve it for ourselves. We still have to solve that pain, all the wrong that was done to us. We have to deal with it, and we have no choice. Now, that doesn't mean we can't get help from others, from advisors, parents, friends, relatives, therapists. I mean, I'm not pushing any therapy stuff, but I'm just saying, when I say solve it for ourselves, can include, and often will include, the help of others. We really aren't likely to do it completely on our own. So, how did we go wrong? And it's like, oh, we ate the fruit. No, I don't mean that. What did we do? God created us with free will. Now, some people think that's a bad idea, which is paraphrasing Douglas Adams, the writer of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I recommend the first book at least, or the movies, or the series on the BBC. Because actually, for an atheist, that's the funny thing, he doesn't even believe in God, but he got so much right about what people are like. He really understood life. Amazing person. God gave us the ability to choose goodness. Now, some people think that was a mistake because if we were forced to do good, the whole world would be peaceful, everything would be perfect, and it would also be perfectly pointless. Because if we can't choose good, if we can't freely choose it, then we're really no different than the animals or the rocks or dirt. I mean, or stars or anything. None of them get to choose. That's just not the way that we're made. We were made with free will, so we have the ability to choose, which means if we make a good choice, we can freely choose to be good. We can freely choose to be happy. And that's what it really comes down to. Anyway, we can freely choose to love. We can love God. We can love others. We can love like God loves. We have that choice. We actually have the freedom to be like God, not in the way of Adam and Eve and the serpent that, oh, you're going to eat this magical fruit and all of a sudden you're going to be like God. And of course the serpent, in the story is lying to them. It's not going to make them like God in one sense, not going to give them power, but it did give them knowledge of evil. And we know, and in the biblical sense, when you know something, you participate in it. It means that by participating in evil, then they really understand it. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, I know about evil way more than I wish I did because of the wrong I've done. To love as God loves, this is interesting. To be like God is to be free of self-interest. To be like God is to be able to love others without getting anything from them. Somebody said something like, if you want to know what somebody's like, see how they treat the people that can do absolutely nothing for them. How do you treat people that can do nothing for you? Is there some lonely person in school that nobody really likes? Nobody cares about them and they're just alone all the time. You look at them, they're eating their lunch alone. Nobody wants to be around them. And what happens if you show them kindness? And sometimes if you do that, oh no, now they want to be your friend and they're really annoying and they're awkward and everything else. And now you got to put up with them. But that's why they don't have friends. And to love them, to love the least of us, that's love. That's being like God. Because as it says in the scripture, God loved us when we were essentially unlovable. God doesn't come to us and say, oh, when you're perfect, let me know and then I'll take you. He says, no, I'll take you as you are and I will make you perfect in the long run. If we fall short at the end of life, there's a certain perfection that God gives us in heaven. It's kind of a requirement and he does the work. We don't have to do it. Really, really understand that God is not saying that he will love you when you are good enough. He loves you now so that you will become good. It's transforming love. And you could do that. Look for lonely people and do that. And it'll be a horrible experience and they'll be really annoying and everything else, but you'll be loving, you'll be like God. Don't get a big head about it. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying go do it, but just be aware. I'm not going to sell you a story that, it's going to be great and it'll be a pleasant experience. It may be. It may be surprisingly beautiful. I've had some great experiences, but I just try to be honest with you about this. Okay. So, lighter than a feather. God wants us to be lighter than a feather. He just wants us to be all beauty, all goodness, all truth, and to live like him. And then we can be happy like him. Anyway, to go toward what's beautiful and true, having no part in darkness. So if we live this way, then we have no part in the darkness. But the problem is, again, we're poisoned. We go wrong because we take that choice and go wrong. So anyway, somehow we chose to do something else that looked better at the time. I was trying to think of how I've gone wrong in my life, and really, it was just because it seemed, the old saying is, it seemed like a good idea at the time, although I can't say it seemed like a good idea, but it was, sometimes I wanted to do something. We all do it. We all make bad decisions. Usually because it looked fun or because we thought it would feel good. C.S. Lewis said that we tend to look forward to sin, that sin is based in the future, that we look forward to doing something because we think it's going to be fun or we think it'll be pleasurable, and that very often, even as we experience it, it's not as good as we thought it would be, and afterward then it's like, oh, that was just junk. And then we look back on it and go, why did I even do that? Oh my goodness, a lot of my life's like that. Anyway, we make the bad decisions all through history, okay? All through history, people chose power, wealth, or pleasure over the love of God. We're talking about Christian kings, bishops, popes. There's a lot of people who have done really wrong things. You're going to see some of this even in your lifetime. There's wars, murders, betrayals, abuse, injustice. I mean, just think about slavery alone. Slavery's been with us since as far back pretty much in history as we can go. Archaeologists can't always find evidence of slavery as clearly as we might wish because the slaves didn't write. They didn't do anything. I mean, they left no mark. We barely have even a trace of them. What we have is writing about them by the owners, about selling them and buying them mostly. Transactions, treating them like objects. So this is how far back it goes. I mean, people will laugh at the church's idea of original sin, but when you look back, you see horrible things going all the way back. So it's not like there's been any society that's ever been really good, ever. And I don't know if it'll ever happen. I wish it would. But we'll see if we can make that happen, but don't get too much hope up about it. Now, most of us are not in a position, I mean, we're just ordinary people, most of us. I don't think any billionaires are going to be watching this video. But if you are, hey, I'm here. Send me something. But the point is that most of us are ordinary people, and most of us aren't going to commit murder, but sometimes we hurt people. And, betrayals, yeah, we can all betray somebody. We could let a friend down. That's easy enough to do. Most of us don't commit wars, but sometimes we want revenge. Sometimes we do something to get even. I mean, there's a lot of ways. There's small ways. Hannah Arendt talked about the banality of evil. And it's boring. Most evils in the world are really not exciting things. There's no shortage of celebrities that have said they want to go to hell because they think it'd be more interesting. No. If you look at all the really evil people in the world, I mean, in history, not just the ones that are around right now, but look back on them, and they're not that interesting of people. They're kind of annoying almost, because a lot of times they're so obsessed with power and money that it makes them less interesting. But you look at the people, look at the saints. If you want to see some different, diverse people, look at the saints, because man alive, they're like all kinds of different people. And they had way more exciting lives than the worst villains of history. I mean, Napoleon is a big deal, and he's studied, and I encourage you to learn all about him you can. But when you really do, you realize he was actually just a crappy person. He just happened to get lucky and had some skills and was able to do some interesting things. I can tell you all about Napoleon. And it's interesting from that point of view. But as a human being, there's lots of people that have those talents, and they did better things with them, but they don't get in the history books. Because if you want to get in the history books, do something really horrible. What is it about nice people never make history, nice women never make history? That's the big thing. Don't be nice, because then you won't be famous. And it's like, no. Be good. Don't be nice, but be good. Good people often don't make history. I mean, that's just the truth. If you really look at it, it's pretty rare. And even the ones that we say are good, that make history, a lot of the time we find out there was an awful lot of bad in them. The people that are hungry for power and wealth are motivated to make changes in the world. And they do. And then they get in the history books. And that's the way it is. If you want to get famous, being Catholic, being a faithful Catholic, being close and holding the Paschal Mystery, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus in your heart is not the way to get famous. So, I mean, trust me on that one. You can go look it up, except for the saints. See? That's the exception. There's always an exception. All right. So now we're going to go back to the advancement in moral development and Kohlberg and everything. I think we've laid the groundwork. So here's the problem. Even in the past century, people that were seeking justice have killed maybe up to 100 million people. Maybe a lot more. Actually, it depends on how you look at it. It'd probably be more than 100 million if you count it. If you count Stalin and Mao together, that pretty much puts you over 120 million right there. Think about that. And they were trying to make life better for people. Now, really, were they really? We're going to put that aside for a moment. But when they went to people and said, make me your leader, they were doing it because I'm gonna save you. I'm gonna do justice for you. It wasn't fair before. The last people were horrible. Now I'm going to really make a great life for you. And then they killed 100 million people. Anyway, they were seeking a better society, often believing that destroying Christianity was right, and that Christianity was responsible for people being unhappy. And if you look around right now, you will know people in your life in the next 10 years, especially if you go to university, that will tell you that Christianity is the source of all evil. That if you leave your faith, without faith, people are happier. And it doesn't take much delving into history to see that isn't really the way it works out. The vast majority of wars that were ever fought, the hundreds of millions of deaths, violent deaths in the world, were mostly because people love power and money. Power and wealth. That's what drove all of it. And you will have people tell you that these hundreds of millions of deaths came from Christianity. And sometimes they just make up facts, which aren't really facts then. But, go know your history, because otherwise, you can get fooled. And I don't want anybody watching this to ever be fooled again. There's no reason for that. Sometimes they were trying to tear down society, and we're still seeing it, to make a better one. Let me just tear up, So I don't know if you've ever had anybody that tried to fix something for you. Sometimes I've been the guy that did this, and I'm really sorry. Have you ever had somebody that said, I can fix that. I can fix, later on it'll be like, I can fix your car. But sometimes it happens like, I can fix this for you. And then they take it all apart and they don't really know what they're doing. Maybe your phone. Has anybody ever tried to fix your phone? These are sealed now, so it's a little harder to do it. But, if they tried to fix something yours and, okay, I'll let you fix it. Thank you. And then they try to fix it and they can't do it. So I have a case right now where somebody just told me that she took her computer into a computer store and they were supposed to fix it. And I took a shot at it early and figured out it was in over my head and said, you need to take this to a professional. Her screen was broken on her computer and it was a special, really nice one. So it's hard to fix. Anyway, so she took it over there and the shop was going to charge her like $600 or more. And they can't fix it. And now, I know they're in for parts because it cost them a fortune in parts already. Now she doesn't have her computer and they keep saying, we'll fix it, but they don't know how. And at some point, I don't know what's going to happen to it. I hope she gets it back. But then she'll have to take it out someplace that's a lot more expensive that actually knows what they're doing. So if you've ever had that, that's the way it is for people that say, I want to do good things, but they don't know how. And just give me your society and I'll break it and everything will be fine. I'll break it and then I'll put it back together better, But they're really lying to themselves because they really don't know what to do. And that's just a good thing to understand. And that's where I'm going back to this idea of moral development, that wanting to be good alone isn't enough, because you could be wrong about what's good. Say that again, okay? It isn't enough to want to be good if you don't know what good is. And they'll say, well, obviously, we want a world where everybody has enough food. And that's wonderful. I want that too. We all do. But if they go about it in a way that ends up making more people starve, which happened in China, under Mao, under the Cultural Revolution, 60 million people starved to death or are executed because that was what he said. That's what it's necessary to make our great society, is for all these people to die. But a lot of it was just he didn't know what he was doing. So this is why we want to learn history. Yes, I take a long time with these things, but I want so much for you to know. And I hope all this makes you hungry to go learn more, because this is a result of a lot of decades of study. And I can't give it to all in a short time like this. Anyway, the point is, they say, okay, we'll tear down society and we'll kill a lot of people and we'll murder them, but in the end, it'll be good. And see, this is seen as being a moral advance by some people. But in the faith, we know that our individual actions matter. And in trying to be like Christ, to try to be like God, we know what we don't know. We know that there are certain things that are just wrong. So we don't do them. Even if we think, see, getting out of trouble, getting a reward, we're going back to stage 1 and stage 2. Even if we think we'll get some good outcome, we can't do something wrong to get it. Because if we do that, we know the outcome probably won't be good anyway. But even if it was, it's wrong. We don't do it. I hope this makes sense. This is so important, and I don't see anybody really saying this right now. So I'm giving you something. I think this is fresh. I mean, not like the church hasn't been saying it in some other way, but put this way, I think it's, I really tried to get all this down into one little bit for you. So, okay, so what else do? They take away people's free will in every way they can. This is back to the idea that some people think it was a mistake for God to give us free will. Because, well, then we can do wrong. So what people's solution is to take away free will. Take away freedom of speech, take away freedom of movement, freedom to choose your work, freedom to achieve. You know, hey, we're not going to let anybody do better than anybody else. You're all going to be in the dirt. And by the way, the leaders will always be up in the nice places. I could tell you stories. I worked with a guy. Did I tell you about this before? I think I told this in one of the other videos. But anyway, a guy that worked for the communists in Russia as a project manager. Fascinating guy. Oh, God, I was so fortunate to actually work with this guy for a while. And he told me stories about it. And the idea was that the people that were the party heads, they took the people that they murdered, they took their mansions away from the rich people they killed, and then they partied in it. And I mean really horrible, like disgusting stuff going on. And they were living a life that was even worse than the people that they criticized. And still killing people. I could tell you stories about that too. I have friends that had professors that were murdered by the communists. You know, in other countries, their professor didn't give the proper respect to the party heads, and they found him dead in the river. So there you go. Anyway, the freedom to, along with freedom to worship God. You know, there's nothing that somebody that loves power hates more than God. So anyway, the idea is that they think that if they take all these freedoms away, that everything will be better. Why did we fail? Why did the world turn out this way? We know that some people really want to be good, and they have, in a sense, good intentions, and yet their intentions aren't good. What's going on here? It's because all these attempts to be good were founded in self-interest. They were all based in self-interest. If we're trying to be good so that everybody will know we're good, that's self-interest. That's not about doing good things for other people. That's about looking good. It's about other people saying good things about us, having a good reputation. So it's instead of being who we were created to be, which is images of God, who is love. And love is a relationship to others. It's not something that we're just good all by ourselves. It's that we are good in relation to others too. Not compared to them, and not in their opinion, but in the way that we deal with one another. That's how we show love. So the key is that we can fool ourselves into thinking that we're good. Now, some of you are just wonderful people, and I look at the responses and I just think, wow, some of you are so cool. But and if you listen to this and you think, oh, maybe I'm not really that good, there's no harm in that. You just want to be careful you don't get something that's not true. See the good in yourself. See the wrong in yourself and work to fix the wrong, and don't lose the good. But anyway, so sometimes we fool ourselves that way. And I ask myself all the time if I'm fooling myself. And I have to work at that. If you study René Descartes, he was doing so much stuff that I'll put a description here. Study him sometime. And his thing was, I'm going to always think that somebody else, I'm going to act as though somebody else is trying to fool me all the time, so that I will be very careful in all that I do to make sure Make sure I'm seeing it accurately. Now, this is more from a scientific point of view, but it's marvelous stuff. It's great. And it's something that I've taken seriously in my life. And I recommend you do too. This is the reason why a lot of a lot of the great scientists of all time and philosophers were Catholics, because they were doing self-examination. And when they realized how easily they could fool themselves, they thought, when I do a scientific experiment, I better make sure I'm not fooling myself. So they really, really went at it. Everybody, all of us in a way, we can't afford not to all be scientists to some degree right now. You got to do that scientific method, and you can be surprised how well you can use it. Okay, so we can fool ourselves into thinking that we are good, that our ideas are good, especially by ignoring God, because God will tell us the truth if we pray. Sometimes even if we don't want it, he'll tell us, and we may choose to ignore it. A lot of people, they have to be farther away from God in order to go wrong, because they just want it. They want the power, they want the wealth, and that means leaving God behind. And so much of my life is it's like a rubber band, and I've got God over here, and I've got me over here, and there's this rubber band, and I'm like, oh, I want to be closer, but oh, I like this money thing. Ooh, I like this other thing over here. It's not really money for me. It's not really even power. I don't know what it is. I just like things that are enjoyable, and that's a problem. But I want to go, and then that rubber band pulls me back to God, and then I'm pulled away from him. So God's love is kind of like a rubber band. So, and if you get too far away, he really pulls hard. But if you try hard enough, you can break it. And that's a horrible thing. It's possible to be arrogant and ignorant, and those two tend to go together. Arrogant is just when you're just so sure you're right, but really you're wrong. If you're sure you're right and you're right, I suppose that's confidence. I don't know. I'd be a little careful on that. I'm not sure. Okay, so wrapping it up here. So in Lent, we have that experience of seeing where we get it wrong and reflecting on it and trying to get closer on that rubber band. Let God pull us closer in Lent. At Easter, when we're reminded of what God did to try and break us out of the poison that we've given ourselves, to break us out of that jail. He's a jailbreaker. He's breaking us out of jail. He's busting us out. We're reminded that God came to us in a way that we really don't understand. I hope you don't think that I understand all this down to the last detail, because I don't. I just accept a lot of it, that I accept that God loves us. And can I really, really understand God's love? How someone could love so perfectly and so completely, who created the universe and is beyond space and time and everything else. Am I going to understand God to that level? No, not really. In heaven, I hope to, at least within my capabilities there, which he will expand. But we believe. And there's, I can't remember the exact saying from St. Augustine, but essentially that we hold a faith that we really can't grasp, I know, hopefully that makes sense. Every time we talk to God, when we pray, we can think of this. There's a saying that's that we are to pray that to God as not as I think you are, but as you know yourself to be. I don't want to pray to a God that I have made up in my head. I don't want to pray to a God that is an illusion that looks very nice. It has to be really God. I can't be in a relationship with something that's not real. I can't be in a relationship with something that's really just my image that I've made up. It has to be real. This is really important for dealing with people, but I can't go into that right now, but sometime I'll do it. When we pray, we can think about the Paschal Mystery. It's a good way to start prayer sometimes, is to think about all the things that Jesus did and the idea of coming to save us so that our lives would not only be good and beautiful, but more interesting, really. It's so much more interesting. It's not about getting stuff. People say, oh, you say that God blessed you, but that's because you have money and everything. No, When I didn't have money, I could see that God was blessing me and caring for me, and his love was still there. And it's not like, I'm not a millionaire or anything. It's not, but I do have a place to live, and that's really nice. I will get some food today. I'm thrilled. A lot of people won't. Anyway, if we don't carry the Paschal Mystery in our hearts, if we don't carry the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus in our hearts, we'll go wrong. And even our attempts to do good things will be poisoned by sin. By looking to ourselves, using other people, or getting things for our happiness. It really comes down to focusing on God. But when we focus on God, we're really taking the best care of ourselves that we can. God created us to freely choose to be good, like him, not just to do good things, but to be goodness all through. God is love, and if we want to be just like him, then we have to be love. And he came to us as Jesus, lived a perfect human life. Yes, it was perfect. Giving himself completely to us as an example. And think about that one for a minute. Jesus came, and it isn't just that he went off and lived this life. He gave himself to us. Now, he gave himself to the people there, sure. But this is why we have the Eucharist. So he continues to give himself to us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that experience. Why is the Eucharist the body and blood of Christ? Because if it was just a symbol, then he's not really giving himself to us. It's just symbolic. He wanted it to be flesh because we are flesh. He wanted it to be solid, tangible. You could touch it. Because that's the experience they had back then. If we didn't have this, we would be at a disadvantage. We wouldn't be getting what the apostles got, what the people that walked with Jesus got. I know literally we don't walk with him in the same way, but I can tell you, more of my day is spent walking with Jesus and walking with God in a garden than I could ever describe. I have learned things, and God has given me his friendship in a way that I certainly don't deserve and didn't do anything for. And it's just freely given. And he offers that to you. You can have the same thing. And if you get your act together now, you can do better than me, because it took me too long to understand these things. Yeah, I'm a very slow learner in holy things. And I don't want you to be a slow learner, but you learn at your own pace. Everybody does. Sorry, I get lost in things. Every time you receive the Eucharist, look at this mystery. Look at the way that God is coming to you to save you and to make you beautiful and wonderful and good. And don't worry about trying to be good to get something. Don't worry about being good to go to heaven. Don't worry about being good to get God's favor, to stay out of trouble. Be good because God desires it for you as his gift. He's giving you free will so that you can choose good freely and be like him. That's his gift to you, is his own life. It's amazing. God actually offers you his own life to live. And you can be like him. In perfect joy. You may not always be happy, but you can have joy. You'd be surprised. God so loved us that he created us. And when we went wrong, he saved us by giving himself to us in the most intimate way possible. The appearance is bread and wine. But he's actually giving himself to us literally. And as a food that makes us Christ-like, if we allow it. So now I'm just in the last little bit here. This is the center of our life. And in living this way, keeping God in our hearts at all times, our life will be amazing beyond anything we can imagine. And when this life is over, will step into the next life and go beyond time, beyond space, into perfect love, seeing God as He is, in perfect freedom and happiness, and fully able to enjoy God's presence. We'll just get to enjoy His company and each other's in a way that is just hard to imagine here, but every now and then we see a little bit of it. So, if this looks good to you, make a decision to live this way now. Right now. To keep this mystery in your heart, following the gospel, accepting the gift of life as God offers it. And this is what it's all about. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment. I'll enjoy reading your responses, but take some time at it, please. And I hope you have a wonderful time, and I hope to see you one day in heaven. Thank you.